Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, and today we're doing another EP wrap up. The EP wrap up is an irregular series that I do whenever I have three or four EPs that I've been enjoying and just want to share them in brief. These are all releases that came out late to mid December, and I didn't really have a chance to give them a listen up until like New Year was almost with us, just because of all the year end review stuff and like holidays and all that stuff. So I'm getting to them now, finally. Now, first on our list is the new DJ Full Tono release, Groove One. Groove One is part of the Groove cassette series that is being started by the Outlines record label and is apparently going to be featuring a different artist every time, which is a cool idea. I like the idea, and for the first release, it's off to a pretty good start. DJ Fultono is one of the kind of oddball, kind of minimalist juke producers that have been getting some hype in Japan for a little while now. And on this release, he has two songs that are both over 9 minutes long and consist of kind of minimalist building grooves that get kind of hypnotic and last really through the whole song and have very little in the way of melody. There's often some synthesizers that are kind of somewhat melodic and somewhat kind of atonal in the background, just being kind of noise. The songs often have like just enough melodic content to imply a chord progression, but don't really show it. The tracks are both really minimalist and really focused on the percussion and the groove of it. And the grooves are good. They're kind of jittery, a little off kilter, but they're still together enough for you to just kind of nod your head to them and get kind of hypnotized by them. But what I find coolest about these is how much impact he's able to do with so little going on, with such a minimalist kind of setup. There's some really like archetypal kind of EDM builds and drops, but they're on such a smaller scale than typical EDM, where typical EDM really kind of shoots up and then drops harsh. Uh, the kind of builds and drops on here are kind of like a rolling hill, but it still really hits me. And I notice that there's been like a big shift in the song, even though what's changed is possibly incredibly minute. And there's just a lot of really cool production on here. It's a pretty solid release. Definitely check this out if you're into artists like Foodman. Link in the description as usual. Next up, we have Tenko with her new mini album, Kogyo Seihin. Tenko is an ex-member of BIS, the brand new idol society, and unlike the other members who decided to go into other kind of alternative idol groups after the breakup, Tenko here has gone solo and is writing her own songs and is doing some kind of experimental stuff. And I'm glad to say, like, it's the first good thing I've heard come out of that corpse of BIS. And yes, that includes the new reformed BIS and their new album. Now, this thing is, it says it's a mini album, but it's almost a half hour long. So I can't really go into too much depth with it because it's just too long and I can't cover a whole bunch of songs like a full album review. But I do want to recommend this thing because I am in love with this thing. It's so good. This thing really covers a lot of different musical ground across its runtime. There's everything from like new wave and synth punk to trance and kind of ambient synth stuff, all the way to what I could almost describe as power electronics. The track Jiro has this beat that is almost like a melding of like hip hop and reggae, but with all synthesizers and like a little bit of traditional Japanese music mixed in there. The beat is huge. It really kind of gets in my bones and makes me want to jam out to this thing. And the vocals are kind of cutesy and high pitched, but there's also like some kind of wavering vibrato when she goes for some of her longer, higher notes that remind me a little bit of like an old Anka singer. It's just a really weird song, and it has a really weird music video as well that I will link down in the description. And then there are tracks like Kuruma, which there are two different versions of on this album, which are just weird. They're covered in just dense layers of sound. The first Kuruma has like this incredible dense wall of electronics that it's like you're trying to hear the song from the other side of this wall, and it's kind of muffled. And it has this like jackhammer like kick drum that's just like just kind of shaking your skull while you're listening to this track. And like you can kind of hear the like skeleton of a pop song on the other side of all of this noise that surrounds it. And then the second Kuruma is poppier, but somehow even weirder. It's covered in these kind of watery synthesizers that are really kind of echoey and shift around the song a lot and use up a lot of sonic space. And then there's like acoustic guitar and singing, and there's some nice harmonies that are kind of pleasing, but then there's also like all this kind of clusterfuck of electronics that are just kind of muffling it all. But it's completely different from the first one. And like they almost don't even feel like the same song. If it weren't for the same vocal melody, I wouldn't believe they were. And then you've got complete curveballs in the track listing, like Goodbye Good Girl, which is like a 80s throwback synth funk thing, kind of a la Especia, and has a little bit of like a vaporwavy vibe to it as well. And despite being almost like a complete clone of Especia's sound, it's like really fun, it's really catchy, it's really dancey, and like I love this track. And there's a really great remix up on YouTube by Pellicolo, which is even better and even funkier. This thing is just such a weird release of great songs. I really recommend you check this thing out if you're into some really kind of oddball, weird pop stuff. And then coming up last, we're doing this in chronological order, by the way, is the new Hag and Oresama split album. That's Hag with a triangle for the A. Hag and Oresama both come together with 3 tracks each, 2 originals, and 1 cover of something by the other artist. It starts off with Hag, and Hag's a band that I'm unfamiliar with. I haven't really listened to them. They seem to be just kind of a pop band with female vocals. Their vocalist is solid. She's a talented singer, clearly. Though I find she's a little flat in the personality department. Like, she doesn't really put a lot of her personality across just in her voice. There's not a lot of kind of color there. She can really sing, but unfortunately, the rest of the music I can't really say I'm as big of a fan of. All of Hag's tracks have like really by the books kind of generic pop sounds to them. They're a little overproduced for me, and they drag on just a bit too long. They have decent choruses, but that's about it. And while I would say the chorus is probably the most important part on pop tracks like these, it's not really all that fun to just be waiting for the chorus during the verse. There's really not much interesting there. And the best thing that Hag puts together is their cover of Oresama's Okami Heart, which is undoubtedly worse than the original. It feels like they've just sapped all of the color and all of the personality and all of the originality out of the song and have made it into just a incredibly boring pop track. And I find that I enjoy this song despite Hag, not because of them. It's just that the song is so good, the original that is, that even when you try to make it into something incredibly boring and generic and played out, it still shines through as something just a little above the grade. But if I can say anything good about this kind of lukewarm, flavorless music in the first half, it's that it makes for a nice juxtaposition when Oresama comes on and starts laying down some really smooth, funky, infectious dance pop. Pon's vocal presence is, as usual, colorful, emotive, and endlessly charming. And Kojima Hideya, the other half of Oresama, who's been cutting his teeth recently making tracks for people like Tenko, really good tracks for people like Tenko, by the way, comes through with the immensely detailed, funky, and well-written tracks that I've come to expect from a man who I think is possibly the best producer in J-pop right now. Needless to say, I love everything that Oresama does here. It's all great, and that includes the cover track they do of the Hag song, Shoujo Tachi no Owaranai Yoru. The original song is a little bit of a ballad. It's fairly generic in pretty much all aspects, and is generally forgettable. But Oresama have sped this track up and turned it from a ballad into a thick, smooth piece of synth funk. They blow the original song out of the water completely and turn this song into something entirely different. It's danceable, it's upbeat, and it's way more catchy than the original ever was. Just to really drive home the point, I'm going to play for you the beginnings of each song. I'm going to play the original first and then the new Oresama version. And you'll pretty immediately hear the difference that's been made.
少女たちの終わらない夜大人たちの言うくだらないものに少女たちの終わらない夜心を奪われることもある少女たちの終わらない夜大人たちの言うくだらないものに少女たちの終わらない夜心を奪われることもある
Well, I think it's pretty clear which one's the better song. If you're into Oresama, if you're into pop music, you need to check this thing out. But yeah, I think we'll call it there. Great release from Oresama. Kind of meh on the Hag side, but I think it's worth it just for the 3 Oresama tracks. And another great release from Tenko. I'm looking forward to hearing more from her. And some pretty solid stuff from the new Groove series on the Outlines label with DJ Full Tono. As usual, links to listen to all this stuff down in the description, YouTube videos or something, some way to preview it. And I will see you guys next week when we're getting into actual 2017 albums that have come out this year. We're going to start reviewing them starting next week. I'll see you there. Peace.